All right. How is everybody? I've been busy trying to get things organized. This is Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer, Chapter 3, titled Holly. Holly, short, was lying in bed silently fuming. Nothing unusual about this. Leprechauns in general were not known for their geniality. But Holly was in an exceptionally bad mood, even for a fairy. Technically, she was an elf, fairy being a general term. She was a leprechaun too, but that was just a job. Perhaps a description would be more helpful than a lecture on fairy genealogy. Holly Short had nut brown skin, cropped auburn hair, and hazel eyes. Her nose had a hook, and her mouth was plump and cherubic, which was appropriate considering Cupid was her great-grandfather. Her mother was a European elf with a fiery temper and a willowy figure. Holly, too, had a slim frame with long tapered fingers, perfect for wrapping around a buzz baton. Her ears, of course, were pointed. At exactly 3 feet in height, Holly was only a centimeter below the fairy average. But even 1 centimeter can make an awful lot of difference when you don't have many to spare. Commander Root was the cause of Holly's distress. Root had been on Holly's case since day one. The commander had decided to take offense at the fact that the first female officer in Recon's history had been assigned to his squad. Recon was a notoriously dangerous posting with a high fatality rate, and Root didn't think it was any place for a girlie. Well, he was just going to have to get used to the idea, because Holly Short had no intention of quitting for him or anybody else. Though she'd never admit it, another possible cause for Holly's irritability was the ritual. She'd been meaning to perform it for several moons now, but somehow there just never seemed to be time, and if Root found out she was running low on magic, she'd be transferred to traffic for sure. Holly rolled off her futon and stumbled into the shower. That was one advantage of living near the Earth's core. The water was always hot. No natural light, of course, but that was a small price to pay for privacy. Underground, the last human-free zone, there was nothing like coming home after a long day on the job, switching off your shield, and sinking into a bubbling slime pool. Bliss. The fairy suited up, zipping the dull green jumpsuit up to her chin and strapping on her helmet. Ellie Precon uniforms were stylish these days, not like the top-of-the-morning costume the Force had to wear back in the old days. Buckled shoes and knickerbockers, honestly. No wonder leprechauns had such ridiculous figures in human folklore. Still, probably better that way, if the mud people knew what the word leprechaun actually originated from. LEP Recon, an elite branch of the lower elements police. They'd probably take steps to stamp them out. Better to stay inconspicuous and let humans have their stereotypes. With the moon already rising on the surface, there was no time for a proper breakfast. Holly grabbed the remains of a nettle smoothie from the cooler and drank it in the tunnels. As usual, there was chaos in the main thoroughfare. Airborne sprites jammed the avenue like stones in a bottle. The gnomes weren't helping either, lumbering along with their big swinging behinds blocking 2 lanes. Swear-toads infested every damp patch, cursing like sailors. That particular breed began as a joke, but had multiplied into an epidemic. Someone lost their wand over that one. Holly battled through the crowds to the police station. There was already a riot outside Spud Emporium. LEP Corporal Newt was trying to sort it out. Good luck to him. Nightmare. At least Holly got the chance to work above ground. The LEP station doors were crammed with protesters. The Goblin Dwarf turf war had flared up again, and every morning hordes of angry parents showed up demanding the release of their innocent offspring. Holly snorted. If there actually was an innocent goblin, Holly Short had yet to meet him. They were clogging up the cells now, howling gang chants and hurling fireballs at each other. Holly shouldered her way into the throng. Coming through, she grunted. Police business. They were on her like flies on a stinkworm. My grumpo is innocent. Police brutality. Officer, could you take my baby in his blankie? He can't sleep without it. Holly set her visor to reflect and ignored them all. Once upon a time, the uniform would have earned you some respect. Not anymore. Now you are a target. Excuse me, officer, but I seem to have misplaced my jar of warts. Pardon me, young elf, but my cat's climbed a stalactite. Or, if you have a minute, Captain, could you tell me how to get to the Fountain of Youth? Holly shuddered. Tourists. She had troubles of her own. More than she knew, and she was about to find out. In the station lobby, a kleptomaniac dwarf was busy picking the pockets of everyone else in the booking line, including the officer he was handcuffed to. Holly gave him a swipe in the backside with her buzz baton. The electric charge singed the seat of his leather pants. What you doing there, Mulch? Mulch started, contraband dropping from his sleeves. Officer Short, he whined, his face a mask of regret. Can't help myself, it's my nature. I know that, Mulch, and it's our nature to throw you in a cell for a couple of centuries. She winked at the dwarf's arresting officer. Nice to see you're staying alert. The elf blushed, kneeling to pick up his wallet and a badge. Holly forged past Root's office, hoping she would make it to her cubicle before. Short, get in here. Holly sighed. Oh well, here we go again. Stowing her helmet under her arm, Holly smoothed the creases from her uniform and stepped into the Commander Root's office. Root's face was purplish with rage. This was more or less his general state of existence, a fact that had earned him the nickname Beetroot. There was an office pool running on how long he had before his heart exploded. The smart money was on half a century at the outside. Commander Root was tapping the moonometer on his wrist. Well, he demanded, what time do you call this? Holly could feel her own face coloring. She was barely a minute late. There were at least a dozen officers on this shift who hadn't even reported in yet, but Root always singled her out for persecution. The thoroughfare, she mumbled lamely. There were 4 lanes down. Don't insult me with your excuses, roared the commander. You know what the city center is like. Get up a few minutes earlier. It was true. She did know what Haven was like. Holly Short was a city elf born and bred. Since the humans had begun experimenting with mineral drilling, more and more ferries had been driven out of the shallow forts and into the depths and security of Haven City. The metropolis was overcrowded and underserviced, and now there was a lobby to allow automobiles in the pedestrianized city center, as if the place wasn't smelly enough already with all those country gnomes lumbering about the place. Root was right. She should get up a bit early, but she wouldn't. Not until everyone else was forced to. I know what you're thinking, said Root. Why am I picking on you every day? Why don't I ever bawl out those other layabouts? Holly said nothing, but agreement was written all over her face. I'll tell you why, shall I? Holly risked a nod. It's because you're a girl. Holly felt her fingers curl into fists. She knew it. But not for the reasons you think, continued Root. You're the first girl in Recon. Ever. You are a test case. A beacon. There are a million fairies out there watching your every move. There are a lot of hopes riding on you. But there's a lot of prejudice against you, too. The future of law enforcement is in your hands, and at the moment, I'd say it was a little heavy. Holly blinked. Root had never said anything like this before. Usually it was just, fix your helmet, stand up straight, blah, 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 blah. You have to be the best you can be, Short, and that has to be better than anybody else. Root sighed, sinking into his swivel chair. I don't know, Holly. Ever since that Hamburg incident. Holly winced. The Hamburg incident had been a total disaster. One of her perps had skipped out to the surface and tried to bargain with the mud people for asylum. Root had to stop time, call in the retrieval squad, and do 4 memory swipes. A lot of police time wasted, all her fault. The commander took a form from his desk. It's no use. I've made up my mind. I'm putting you on traffic and bringing in Corporal Frond. Frond? Exploded Holly. She's a bimbo, an airhead. You can't make her the test case. Root's face turned an even deeper shade of purple. I can, and I will. Why shouldn't I? You've never given me your best. Either that or your best just isn't good enough. Sorry, Short. You had your chance. The commander turned back to his paperwork. The meeting was over. Holly could only stand there, aghast. She'd blown it. The best career opportunity she had ever likely to get, and she'd tossed it in the gutter. One mistake and her future was past. It wasn't fair. Holly felt an uncharacteristic anger taking hold of her, but she swallowed it. This was no time to lose her temper. Commander Root, sir, I feel I deserve one more chance. Root didn't even look up from his paperwork. And why is that? Holly took a deep breath. Because of my record, sir. It speaks for itself. Apart from the Hamburg thing, 10 successful recons. Not a single memory wipe or time stop apart from the Hamburg thing, completed Root. Holly took a chance. If I were a male, one of our precious sprites, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Root glanced up sharply. Now just a minute, Captain Short. He was interrupted by the bleeping of one of the phones on his desk. Then two, then three. A giant view screen crackled into life on the wall behind him. Root jabbed the speaker button, putting all the callers on conference. Yes? We've got a runner. Root nodded. Anything on Scopes? Scopes was the shop name for the shrouded trackers attached to American communication satellites. Yep, said the caller two. Big blip in Europe, southern Italy, no shield. Root cursed. An unshielded ferry could be seen by mortal eyes. That wasn't so bad if the perp was humanoid. Classification? Bad news, Commander, said the third caller. We got a rogue troll. Root rubbed his eyes. Why did these things always happen on his watch? Holly could understand his frustration. Trolls were the meanest of the deep tunnel creatures. They wandered the labyrinth, preying on anything unlucky enough to cross their path. Their tiny brains had no room for rules or restraint. Occasionally one found its way to into the shaft of a pressure elevator. Usually the concentrated air current fried them, but sometimes one survived and was blasted to the surface. Driven crazy by pain and even the tiniest amount of blight, they would generally proceed to destroy everything in their path. Root shook his head rapidly, recovering himself. Okay, Captain Short. Looks like you get your chance. You're running hot, I take it? Yes, sir, lied Holly, all too aware that Root would suspend her immediately if he knew she'd neglected the ritual. Good. Then sign yourself out a sidearm and proceed to the target area. Holly glanced at the view screen. Scopes were sending high-res shots of an Italian fortified town. A red dot was moving rapidly through the countryside toward the human population. Do a thorough reconnaissance and report in. Do not attempt a retrieval. Is that understood? Yes, sir. We lost 6 men to troll attacks at last quarter. 6 men. That was below ground, in familiar territory. I understand, sir. Root pursed his lips doubtfully. Do you understand, Short? Do you really? I think so, sir. Have you ever seen what a troll can do to flesh and bone? No, sir, not up close. Good. Let's not make today your first time. Understood. Root glared at her. I don't know why it is, Captain Short, but whenever you start agreeing with me, I get decidedly nervous. Root was right to be nervous, if he'd known how this straightforward recon assignment was going to turn out. He would probably have retired then and there. Tonight, history was going to be made, and it wasn't the discovery of radium, first man on the moon, happy kind of history. It was the Spanish Inquisition, here comes the Hindenburg, bad kind of history. Bad for humans and fairies, bad for everyone. Holly proceeded directly to the chutes. Her normally chatty mouth was a grim slash of determination. One chance, that was it. She would allow nothing to break her concentration. There was the usual line of holiday visa hopefuls stretching to the corner of Elevator Plaza, but Holly bypassed it by waving her badge at the waiting line. Truculent gnome refused to yield. How come you LEP guys get to go topside? What's so special about you? Holly breathed deeply through her nose. Courtesy at all times. Police business, sir. Now, if you could just excuse me. The gnome scratched his massive behind. I hear you LEP guys make up your police business just to get a look at some moonlight. That's what I hear. Holly attempted an amused smile. What actually formed on her lips resembled a lemon-sucking grimace. Whoever told you that is an idiot, sir. Recon only ventures above ground when absolutely necessary. The gnome frowned. Obviously he had made up the rumor himself, and suspected that Holly might have just called him an idiot. By the time he'd figured it out, she had skipped through the double doors. Foley was waiting for her in ops. Foley was a paranoid centaur, convinced that human intelligence agencies were monitoring his transport and surveillance networks. To prevent them from reading his mind, he wore a tinfoil hat at all times. He glanced up sharply when Holly entered through the pneumatic door. Anybody see you come in here? Holly thought about it. The FBI, CIA, NSA, DEA, MI6, and the EIB. Foley frowned. The EIB? Everyone in the building. Holly smirked. Foley rose from his swivel chair and clip-clopped over to her. Oh, you're very funny, Short. A regular riot. I thought the Hamburg incident might have knocked some of the cockiness out of you. If I were you, I'd concentrate on the job in hand. Holly composed herself. He was right. Okay, Foley, fill me in. Centaur pointed to a live feed from the Eurosat, which was displayed on a large plasma screen. This red dot is the troll. He's moving toward Martina Franca, fortified town near the city of Brindisi. As far as we can tell, he stumbled into Vent E7. It was on cooldown after a surface shot. That's why the troll isn't crispy barbecued right now. Holly grimaced. Charming, she thought. We've been lucky in that our target is dumped into some food along the way. He chewed on a couple of cows for an hour or two, so that bought us a bit of time. Couple of cows, exclaimed Holly. Just how big is this fellow? Foley adjusted his foil bonnet. Bull troll, fully grown, 180 kilos, with tusks like a wild boar. A really wild boar. Holly swallowed. Suddenly recon seemed a much better job than retrieval. Right. What have you got for me? Foley cantered across to the equipment table. He selected what looked like a rectangular wristwatch. Locator, you find him, we find you. Routine stuff. Video? The centaur clipped to a small cylinder into the accommodating groove on Holly's helmet. Live feed, nuclear battery, no time limit. The mic is voice activated. Good, said Holly. Root said I should take a weapon on this one, just in case. Way ahead of you, said Foley. He picked a platinum handgun from the pile. A Neutrino 2000, the latest model. Even the tunnel gangs don't have these. 3 settings, if you don't mind. Scorched, well done, and crispy to a cinder. Nuclear power source too, so plug away. This baby will outlive you by 1,000 years. Holly strapped a lightweight weapon into her shoulder holster. I'm ready, I think. Foley chuckled. I doubt it. No one's ever really ready for a troll. Thanks for the confidence, Booster. Confidence is ignorance, advised the centaur. If you're feeling cocky, it's because there's something you don't know. Holly thought about arguing, but didn't. Maybe it was because she had a sneaking suspicion that Foley was right. The pressure elevators were powered by gaseous columns vented from the Earth's core. The LEP tech boys, under Foley's guidance, had fashioned titanium eggs that could ride on the currents. They had their own independent motors, but for an express ride to the surface, there was nothing like the blast of a tidal flare. Foley led her past a long line of chute bays to E7. The pod sat in its clamp, looking very fragile to be rocketing about on magma streams. Its undersides was charred black and pockmarked from shrapnel. Centaur slapped it fondly on a fender. This baby's been in service for 50 years, oldest model still in the chutes. Holly swallowed. Chutes made her nervous enough without riding in an antique. When does it come offline? Foley scratched his hairy belly. With funding the way it is, not until we have us a fatality. Holly cranked open the heavy door. The rubber seal yielded with a hiss. The pod was not built for comfort. There was barely enough space for a restraining seat among the jumble of electronics. What's that? Asked Holly, pointing to a grayish stain on the seat's headrest. Foley shuffled uncomfortably. Brain fluid, I think. We had a pressure leak on the last mission. But that's plugged now, and the officer lived, down a few IQ points, but alive, and he can still take liquids. Well, that's all right then, quipped Holly, threading her way through the massive wires. Foley strapped the harness onto her, checking the restraints thoroughly. All set? Holly nodded. Foley tapped her helmet mic. Keep in touch, he said, pulling the door behind him. Don't think about it, Holly told herself. Don't think about the white-hot magma flow that's going to engulf the tiny craft. Don't think about hurtling toward the surface with a Mach 2 force trying to turn you inside out. And certainly, don't think about the blood-crazed troll ready to disembowel you with his tusks. Nope, don't think about any of that stuff. Too late. Foley's voice sounded in her earpiece. T-20, he said. We're on a secure channel in case the mud people have started underground monitoring. You never know. An oil tanker from the Middle East intercepted a transmission one time. What a mess that was. Holly adjusted her helmet mic. Focus, Foley. My life is in your hands here. Okay. Sorry. We're going to use the rail to drop you into E7's main shaft. There's a surge due any minute. That should see you past the first 100 clicks. Then you're on your own. Holly nodded, curling her fingers around the twin joysticks. All systems check. Fire it up. There was a whoosh as the pod's engines ignited. The tiny craft jostled in the housing, shaking Holly like a bead in a rattle. She could barely hear Foley speaking into her ear. You're in the secondary shaft now. Get ready to fly, Short. Holly pulled a rubber cylinder from the dash and slipped it between her teeth. No good having a radio if you swallowed your tongue. She activated the external cameras and put the view on screen. The entrance to E7 was creeping toward her. The air was shimmering in the landing light glow. White-hot sparks tumbled into the secondary shaft. Holly couldn't hear the roar, but she could imagine it. A raw, skinning wind like a million trolls howling. Her fingers tightened around the joystick. The pod shuddered at a halt at the lip. The chute stretched above and below, massive, boundless, like dropping an ant down a drain pipe. Righto, crackled Foley. Hold on to your breakfast. Roller coasters ain't got nothing on this. Holly nodded. She couldn't speak, not with the rubber in her mouth. The Centaur would be able to see her in the pod cam anyway. Sayonara, sweetheart, said Foley, and pressed the button. The pod's clamp tilted, rolling Holly into the abyss. Her stomach tightened as G-force took hold, dragging her to the center of the earth. The seismology section had 1,000,000 probes down there, with a 99.8 success rate at predicting the magna flares, but there was always that 0.2%. The fall seemed to last for an eternity, and just when Holly had mentally consigned herself to the scrap heap, she felt it, that unforgettable vibration, the feeling that outside her tiny sphere, the whole world was being shaken apart. Here it comes. Fins, she said, spitting the word around the cylinder. Foley may have replied. She couldn't hear him anymore. Holly couldn't even hear herself, but she did see the stabilization fins slide out on the monitor. The flare caught her like a hurricane, spinning the pod at first until the fins caught. Half-melted rocks pelted the craft's underside, jolting it toward the chute walls. Holly compensated with bursts from the joystick. The heat was tremendous. In the confined space, enough to fry a human, but fairy lungs are made of stronger stuff. The acceleration dragged at her body with invisible hands, stretching the flesh over her arms and face. Holly blinked salty sweat from her eyes and concentrated on the monitor. The flare had totally engulfed her pod, and it was a big one too, force 7 at the very least. A good 1,000-foot girth. Orange-striped magna swirled and hissed around her, searching for a weak point in the metal casing. The pod groaned and complained. 50-year-old rivets threatened to pop. Holly shook her head. The first thing she was going to do on her return was kick Foley straight in the hairy behind. She felt like a nut inside a shell, between a gnome's molars. Doomed. Tomorrow I will finish Chapter 3. I miss you all, and we will talk to you tomorrow.